Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Accountability Podcast, brought to you by Benjamin Jerome J Friedman. Now, who am I and what are we going to talk about throughout this podcast? Usually it's going to be around 30 minutes, it shouldn't be more. So, I am a 28-year-old entrepreneur, writer, and life coach. Now, everything I'm going to tell you about my journey through this will be very, very, very short in the beginning because we have a lot of content that I want to get through today. And as the podcast will go along, there'll be a lot more stories and experiences shared that will kind of give you a bigger picture of who I am. This is just an intro, so I hope you enjoy not only listening to my voice, but everything I have to say, and maybe, and the purpose of this content and the journey, as you'll see, as I explain later on, is basically to try and grow as a person. Like, I just want one person to kind of take anything I say and find a way to make it useful for them. Then it would be very, very, very useful, not only for me, but to literally myself. So thank you if you share it or you talk about this with your friends. It's very much appreciated. And I love you all. Okay, so I am, like I said, 28. I was born in Indianapolis. Moved here when I was 3. And been here for around 25 years. So for those of you who don't know, I grew up in a small city called Ranana, which is very much filled with a bunch of immigrants. And for those of you who don't know where that is, it's in Israel. It's pretty much in the central. And it was a huge place for tech in the 90s. So many Anglo families and French and a lot of international people came and moved here. And it became very, it's a unified place. What's beautiful about this place is that, for good or bad, like everything, it's served a very strong purpose to help me communicate and learn also the Israeli culture, but by not losing my American or Anglo, kind of combining the two. What do I mean by that? Is that when I went to elementary school, there was 12 English speakers just in my class, not my entire grade. And that kind of persisted until I went to middle school. So that's part of the reason why my English is the way that it is today. Another thing that you should know is that after I finished high school, which I actually studied in a yeshiva, that'll be surprising for many of you who know me, because I don't really conduct myself outwardly with tzitzits and a yarmulke, and for those of you who don't know, ultra-Orthodox way, not at all. I'm much more a preacher of moderation and finding, what way works best for you. And I would say most people in today and age follow that principle. Now, a really interesting point, which I think is not really discussed in today's age, that I really want to kind of shine a light on throughout this podcast, is the way to use spirituality to kind of connect to your purpose and your work and to get that to its ideal self. So there's a great book called Think Big and Grow Rich, also The Power of the Subconscious Mind. And they talk about something really, really interesting, which correlates to something I learned a while back and relearned again. It's the best way to communicate with the subconscious mind is just as the first thing is you wake up and the last thing you do before you go to sleep. You can say affirmations, I am wealthy, I am wise, and it will help your subconscious internalize that and kind of give you that power throughout and the confidence as well. So what's really cool is that this relatively new, The Power of the Subconscious Mind and Think Big and Grow Rich was written by Napoleon Hill in around 30s, 40s, 50s maybe. No, a bit later. It was after Andrew Carnegie. But regardless, I relearned by going through the Shulchan Aruch. For those of you who don't know, it's a really 300, 400 year old kind of commentary book that breaks down some of the points in the Pentateuch and kind of shows you the benefits. And big point, which I want to relate to back to the book, is the fact that we're supposed to pray first thing as we wake up, first thing before we go to sleep. And it's the exact same point, and this is knowledge that's, predated 2,000 something years ago of why. And that's kind of one of the things that I want to do here is take these tidbits of information from history, from theology, philosophy, sociology, psychology, and kind of show you how they've been used and implemented throughout humanity, because these all kind of deal with the human condition. But the main purpose of this is to kind of go through goals. It's to help keep me accountable and kind of help build the confidence to communicate with you guys in this kind of format, because I wouldn't always feel the most comfortable with this. For example, I remember many years ago, I had opened an account on Twitter, and I think I only touched it once in 2014 when it was first open, and then another 4 years later in 2018. And the reason I know this specifically, and I can tell you the dates, is because I looked this up yesterday preparing for this podcast. And what was really, really cool is that I found the tweet that was always in my head was the one I wrote in 2018, because I think it was really indicative of how I was feeling at the time. I'm going to bring it up to you right now, okay? And I'm going to attach the links and everything in the thing below, as well as you can see my information. Okay, so this was written April 15th, 2018. Don't remember writing those tweets 4 years ago. So yeah, I thought I'd come back to Twitter, the place where no one listens to what I have to say. I thought I had enough of this in person, but I guess not. So part of my experience with in that time was a very dark age in my life, where I kind of lost all my independence, and I had no real way to kind of express it. And that's, and because I went through so much darkness kind of alone, I felt very strong. And that kind of gave me the confidence to be like, okay, I'm doing this all alone. I've dealt with so much awful shit. There's nothing wrong to do if I put it on there. So I put it on there, and I even recorded some content for YouTube and stuff. But then I realized that I was nowhere near ready to be any kind of inspiration. I mean, I guess that sounds a bit ridiculous, but I want to show you the picture. At this time, I was around 85 kilos, so I think it's pretty self-explanatory at this point why I didn't pursue that any further. But now, this is 4 years later. Wow, did I go through a lot? And part of the reason I went through so much, and when I share with you what's been happening in 4 years, you'll think it's crazy. But the way I like to roll is to kind of throw myself into the deep end. For example, when I finished high school, most people here, especially from my modern Orthodox community, go straight to either studying like a year and a half before the army, and then joining the army. And I didn't really want to do that. Growing up on TV, a lot of the ideal for me was New York, that kind of like the city that never sleeps, where you're always with your friends and everything. And obviously, Friends is like a show that everyone's addicted to because of that comfort feeling of together. So I really wanted that, and I didn't want to go straight into the army, and I didn't want to do the mechina because I consider myself someone different. And at the same time, going there, I kind of skipped the SATs or psychometry for those of you who don't know, by going and becoming a transfer student from a community college to when I'd finish army over here and join the college. So it was kind of a way to kind of cut the system. I lived all over New York, all over the five boroughs for a year and a half. I worked, I studied, I got good grades, I was working, making decent money, and it was a really, really happy time. I mean, I also lived with like 15 roommates for most of that time in one house, which I'm sure I'll talk more about, um, especially when we'll go into the subject about government and my role, the role that I'd like to play in it. But joining the army after that was difficult, especially because of this trait that I have to kind of jump into the deep end. So I jumped into the deep end by um, applying for a gibush, like what's it called? It's called a like training training camp or something like that to see if you're qualified to be in the elite unit of my infantry brigade. So I got in. It was like 5 days of intense hell. I mean, you didn't have a watch, you didn't have barely any sleep, and it was so much physical intensity plus memory challenges as well as interviews. Just so much. Mamash, like for those of you who have gone through some interesting interview processes, it's nothing like that. It's much more intense. But that doing that, going from one thing to another and jumping in straight into the most intense thing, it's it's not easy, but it's beautiful because you get to experience everything, the hardships all at once, and you kind of challenge yourself, and for the most time, you force yourself to either make it or not, and it's not easy. It's not always the smartest thing to do. If I were to tell someone to do it, I'd say do what makes you feel better. Like, if this is the way that you act, then you do it. I've learned to live with this and kind of make the best of it. And this, like, condition, I don't know what to call it. I'd like to say this challenge that I have a natural response to do is what led me to get to where I am today in all these different fields. And what do I mean by that is what this podcast kind of serves is to kind of help keep me accountable, like I said. So some of the things that are going to keep me accountable are first the consistency of coming to talk to you here and sharing everything that I'm going through and being open, because that's something that's been a problem for me, and I think that it'll continue to help me. And then the solution is this talking, and also having you guys hold me accountable, because when I know that I have to bring my goals, and not only do I have to meet them for this quarter, because I have so many projects, it's kind of like, oh, well, this project's on hold now because this project takes a higher priority. So I gotta put my efforts into this. And then when this project stalls, I can go back. Now, the problem with this is that there's a lot of open projects, and everything gets delayed because, especially if you want to get help or advice or other tools that you need to kind of perfect a project. Now, for those of you who kind of tell where I'm going with this, perfectionism can really deter success, as well as, you know, spreading them out, a sense of procrastination. What I've learned to do is kind of figure out the way that works for me. And in the past year or so, I would say that, I had all these goals. I've always had goals. But now I've learned how to build the systems to put them into place, to build the habits to get me to those overall goals. And this is something beautiful, which I just read on the Tools of Titans, Tim Ferriss podcast, Tim Ferriss book about all his podcasts with all his people. And one of those people said that is that losers have habits, winners have systems. So this is a new way for me to integrate a new system to keep all the things attractive. Because one goal that I accomplished this year, which I am super proud of, and for those of you who've spoken to me in the past month or two, no, I wouldn't shut up about this. So I'm sorry for that, first of all. And second, I'm proud. I'm proud that I was able to finish 53 or 54 books already since the beginning of the year, which was actually pretty easy. And the way I was able to do it is habit stacking. Habit stacking is when you combine one habit and then you just add another habit. So I have like ADHD. Now, the way that I can kind of stimulate that is, if you're playing with something on one hand and then you're allows you to focus, or just pacing. Those things really help. So what I do is, to help deal with that and so I can consume, I will paint, listen to an audiobook, walk, listen to an audiobook, just do a bunch of different things that I like to do, and then just add an audiobook to them. So for past couple months, I was working as a baker, so early hours in the morning, and listening to an audiobook. And wow, do you learn how to really, really appreciate and learn some serious information. Because when listening to an article or watching some video on YouTube, you get the information about the topic, but you can miss a very big detail from the person, because when you spend more time on a book takes months, if not years, to complete. When video can take a month, 2 months at the most, and you kind of get more of the person's heart and effort into it. And it's much more researched and detailed. So books are definitely have the higher priority, but the way that I made sure to stay on top of what I'm learning, and to not, just be like, okay, I'm listening to the book, I'm doing this. I would write down the points that are most interesting and take the highest precedent of information that I can utilize. And then I combine that to my notes. Now, I don't know if I can show you this right now, because I don't know exactly how the format will go, but later on I'll probably show you guys the system that I implemented for notes. Very, very, very diligent, because it's just kind of like, they say if you keep your room clean, you keep your mind clean. So keeping my notes organized and clean helps keep my mind clean and organized. And then I don't have things bouncing around. It's very easy for me to let go. Another thing which I recently saw, that a study was published that kind of covered all the 50, sorry about that, all the Fortune 500 CEOs, 49 out of 50 wrote down what they had to do in the morning. Now, this is something that I've been preaching for a good couple of months now, and I've even created a journal that you'll be able to find on the website when it goes live. It is so crucial and so important for you to write down what you have to do, because then you'll have like an anchor for that day. For example, podcast, and then you can do a side, and I also write my values that I'm going to use and why I do it. And together with that, it helps fill my day with more purpose and more meaning, and I know how to just run from one thing to another. That's why my days can go up to like 14 hours, 16 hours of just doing a bunch of stuff. And it's not just work, I make it important to work out, try to swim every day for at least 15 minutes, because there's a really, really interesting study that I recommend everybody, and I'm going to talk about more in my other podcast with Andrea, um, where we focus on more wellness, and you guys will kind of hear that, is that if you work out 4 or 5 times a day with an elevated heart rate for over 15 minutes, it's like taking antidepressant. And that is something that is so beneficial, and that's why you see people that work out, they have to work out, um, they have this like addiction, they need it, otherwise they know their body's effects of not. Now the way that they have programmed themselves is by habits, but what's really cool is the reward, that dopamine of going to do it, is something that we should try and implement every day. And I'm going to talk more about this in a later podcast, but that dopamine helps push us from thing to thing. That's our reward. So it's not like at the end of this, I'm going to do that. At the end, I've recorded this, I'm going to be happy. Now, I wish I can say that it's true for everything, because after this, I'm still want a burger. That's one of my cheats. But that's something we gotta learn how to balance, because everything in life boils down to balance and duality. There's two things on every side. So the more you can kind of push what you can do, the more you'll need less and less from either sides. Like the more you'll be able to function. For example, if I say that I need to have breakfast at 10, but then I push myself to continue working till 11, and then I can have breakfast at 12, I can get a kind of a dopamine from that. But all these things will be talked about in depth in future podcasts. I will also link to the podcast between me and Andrea. She is a wonderful musician, and she is a product manager. She is also one of the sweetest, most happiest people I know. And if you talk to her about her experiences, you'd be like, wow, that person's been through some shit. And how are they able to be so happy? Now, this is the beautiful thing that I want to emphasize, not only on that podcast, but here, is that no matter through the shit is the traumas that you experience, going to help you get to your ideal self. Because when you internalize it and you put it in a box of okay, this formula says this is my trauma, this is the result of that trauma, and this is what I can make out of both of them together. So remember how I'd spoken to you about 2018, where I was 85 kilos. Now, for retrospect, I'm 65. And I lost all that within 6 months. But the point of it that I'm saying here is that when I took those, when I had taken that leap towards creating this YouTube channel, I needed to do it, because all the shit that I'd gone through, I was like, no. I can't have gone through all this shit without having some. So I automatically ran to do that meeting. And that's kind of been part of the way that I've dealt with it, with all my issues, with all my periods of depression, everything. It's the grandiosity, it's the solution to it. And that has its own issues, but we'll talk about that another time. And I think we kind of touched on it by having so many projects as a way of tool of coping. But I've learned how to really bring everything to a point where it can be manageable. So I really try to have every aspect of my work kind of put into 3 different categories. So this goes down into one big company. Now, as you can tell, I'm a bit hesitant whether to share it all or not. But because this practice is about being open and challenging myself, I'm just going to do it because I want to have this place where I just let it all out. Now, as a point for competitions and everything, I think it's a bit irrelevant at this point. In the future, it'll be. But I have a real goal to start a company called Friedman Industries. And this company has another 5 or 6 core industries. So there's the entertainment industry, and that goes under Friedman Group, which is kind of helping other artists record work by coaching. Sorry. This is something that tends to be an issue because I'm doing so much. It's kind of difficult for me to tell someone where to start. So when I'm going and people ask me, what do I do? Every time feels like an answer, but my cousin gave me a really good line. I do what I gotta do to get things done. And the way I kind of break it down is I'm an entrepreneur. First and foremost, the first thing I knew that I wanted to be was an entrepreneur. At the age of 7, I was playing a game of Monopoly with my brothers, and I was whooping their ass. 2 older brothers, 4 years older and 6 years older. And I was winning. And I don't think I've ever lost a game of Monopoly. And because I was so winning, my body was just so pushing it, and my determination to keep on winning, that drive, that feeling, oh my God, did it get me. It got me. And I've been addicted to that ever since. Not to mention that I've had a personal hero to look up to throughout this entire time, who's done so many amazing things. My grandfather, Mark Haston, he's created a book called Mark My Words. And the book kind of goes through his life. It's an autobiography. And his life is something magical. He joined the army when he joined the Polish army, which part of the Russian brigade. Anyways, it was a Polish brigade inside the Russian army when he was 14. So he lied about his age, and till the last days, he didn't know exactly when he was born. So he would just pick a random day, and that would be celebrate his birthday. And then after that, he met up with his family after the Holocaust. They went to the U.S. He had to stay in Europe. He couldn't get a visa, and he actually fought with Edzard, where he was kind of like a spy. That's exactly what it was. And then he was on a ship called the Internet, which was kind of a horrific story between a civil war that not really talked about in Israeli culture anymore. After fighting in the independence war here for around 2 years, he could not make a living. So he moved to Canada, met my grandmother, got married over the weekend there where they first met. And then he went to the U.S., got a degree, and was working full time. So his days were 16 hours, 17 hours, no questions asked. Afterwards, he worked at General Mills as the head of research development for the mechanical engineers. So he was in charge he basically invented Pringles, Cheerios, Bugles. One of his personal things, which he made at home, which my grandmother told him, don't bring it to work, was the bending straw. And she was right. She was a boss. Hopefully we'll get her on here on this podcast soon, but we'll see. So this podcast is going to run a bit longer because it's introduction, so excuse me for that. But let's continue. So after he had made only $1 from each patent, he had to he had to move on to a different job because he was just getting screwed. So my great uncle had opened up a nursing home, and he asked my brother to come and help him. His brother, my grandfather, and my grandfather came, and they were very successful. They built a chain of nursing homes, and after the chain of nursing homes, they sold that, and they built a chain of banks. And after they built that chain of banks, they sold that, and my grandfather took all the money that he made, and he basically donated it all to charity. And what do I mean? He just donated it all to charity, got the tax benefits, went off to some beach. No, 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 no. My grandfather became the chairman of a tiny college called Touro College in New York. And he basically built it into a chain of universities, which it is today. And he was that chairman till the day he died. This is another important concept that I've learned from the book of Ikigai. And it basically summarizes how people are able to live up to 110 more centenarians that live in Okinawa. And they found that one of the things that they don't even have part of their culture is the word retirement. They don't. They do what they love. And that's kind of what helps them get to those ages. What helps them be so happy is doing what they love. And also a little bit of stress. A little bit of stress is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. You need to be active. You need to worry a little bit. These things that we associate as bad, they have other utilities. We just see them as that because the feelings are so strong and so negative. So after this story with my grandfather, you can see why it's so important for me to do that good in the world, especially since I've always been a creative person, and this is something that I didn't even know till past 2 years. My journey of self-exploration, I found that when I was in first grade, before even the Monopoly story, I would just write. I would just write nonstop, and I would tell stories. Ooh, girl, did I tell stories. Just for days. And that was kind of that was part of who I was. That was my way of coping. That was my way of expression. And now, having experienced all the things, starting a couple businesses, I realized that I'm first an artist. And then I'm that businessman. And I think both of them have a very strong pull together because they require a lot of creativity and flexibility. To adjust and to learn and to observe. Now, the last thing that I've kind of found to be my purpose is coaching, life coaching. Now, I like to help people, everybody, kind of get to understand who they are, find their sense of meaning, and kind of taking that to find their purpose. And after they find their purpose, they can run onto their careers, jobs, whatever, and make their life 100 times better. Because there was, I think, around 1.5 years, 2 years, where I was working as a broker/consultant. And what I would do is I would meet with a lot of startups, and we'd kind of go through, okay, this is what you need to be ready for investors. But at the same time, I'd also see how their internal management was as well as their personal management. And I found that those founders that had issues kind of managing their own life, that some of those issues tended to bleed towards their work. Now, I don't mean that everybody who has issues at home or something like that is going to bring that into work. I'm saying that their mood will affect the way that they work. So it's very important for us to find the ways that we respond and we react and we think and master that. And by master that, I mean that we need to communicate. Now, the best and most effective way is to write. Write down. I'm not saying become an author or anything of this sort. I'm saying write for yourself. Whether in the morning what you have to do, and then at night what you felt about the day. Something that you want to just release. It doesn't matter. It can be, I really recommend everybody taking just 2 minutes every day for 21 days and implementing that. And I'm telling you, I can guarantee you that it will help. Because I've went through so much shit. And thank God I've had help. I've had help to, I've went to a therapist and I've got help for that. And part of my time in therapy, I learned it's about asking yourself the hard questions. And when you know how to answer those questions and ask yourself those questions, you can really heal, I can't even explain how fast you can heal. Because you realize that it's not good or bad, it's just the way it was supposed to be for you to get to where you are today and what you've learned from it. Okay, now that we've went through so much kind of background into me and why, the whys of each of them, now I'll talk about how. So the greatest why, and this is something that in the past 4 years I've learned, is I was always like, I need to make a lot of money to make the world better. Make the world better. And then, if the money is meant to be, it'll come. But just have that be your goal. Because until I made a lot of money, I felt like I couldn't do any good. But once I've done that switch, I realized that I can do a lot of good now. And I can do a lot of good. Meaning my purpose is not reliant on something else. And that is one of the ways that I've found that I've tended to procrastinate a lot, because I would be like, oh, I don't have this tool, I don't have that tool, I don't have this person, I don't have that help. And everything would just get pushed off. But when you put yourself in that place where you have to do it, and there's no one else that can help you, that's when you get to your full motivation. After you start implementing that on a day-to-day basis, then is when you'll get the full motivation. And even then, there will be days where it doesn't. But the consistency that you will implement make things easier. Really. Now, back to the beast. Friedman Industries. Now, like I said, there's 5 industries that I want to go into. Entertainment. Now, entertainment is very important for me because my grandfather, God rest his soul, for a really long time wanted to make a movie or a TV show out of his story. And he brought that up to me because he knew I was a storyteller and everything. He could tell. And that's something that stuck with me, and it's a sense of responsibility which I carry today. So I've been writing for the past 3 years now, 2.5, I would say, a consistent basis. 2. Let's underplay it. And I have found so much relief from it, a way of communicating, and that's kind of the way I started, by writing my poems. Now, I have around 7, 8 writing projects, like 4 children's books, 1 poem collection, however you choose to call it, 2 books, and 1 script. So, out of the dividing it and trying to just focus on one thing, I've decided to do the poetry. I call it a poetry book. It's called The Collection of Us, and it's basically a book about kind of my process as well as the collection of poems. I think it'll be very interesting. You'll find it on Amazon, and I will have it on my bio. So when you listen to this, hopefully you can go and purchase it. That is the writing goals for now. I will also upload some of my work on my thesis that I did for identity and business that will be uploaded mostly on LinkedIn and as well on my website and blog, so you can read that. What else I will be doing kind of for a long-term goal that I've had of mine, I think a year and a half ago, was to swim the Kinneret, Sea of Galilee, which is 10 kilometers. I've been working a long time, and you lose sight of the end goal, and you're just so busy with other things, and it just gets piled up. So this week next week, I'm gonna try and swim 8K, and 2K every day. So by the end of the quarter, and that's when these goals are set for, is to kind of get to that goal of swimming 10K. Now, after I would do those swimmings, I recommend finding the best way to start these new habits is finding the most joyful time to do it. So the most joyful time for me to swim was sunsets, especially butterfly, going up and down, seeing the sunset, magical, mamash. Highly recommend. So now that I've put those personal goals and the writing goals, there's another two. There's a company that I've been working on, which hopefully by the end of the quarter, I will have not only completed the prototype, but I would have launched the business entirely, and you guys can buy it. I will have it as a sponsor. Can Do is the name of the product, and basically what the purpose of it is to help soothe anxiety and depression using our main ingredient. Plus, this is the beautiful part about it, we have a unique terpene that enhances the effects of the plant itself, plus provides new scents that not only make it much more delicious to use as a tea or as a substitute or whatever you want, to make it a truly delightful, experience of consumption. And the vision for this company is to kind of get to the point where we have created health products using any and all plants out there to make the best product out there as organic and healthy, and by giving a lot of information to the user. So that's one of the businesses. Now, what I want to talk about most right now is that transition that I went through, because, and if you go on my Twitter or Instagram, you'll see that for surviving, you need to find others. For thriving, you need to find yourself. Now, first 2 years, I needed to you do both, because you need people to talk to and share and communicate with to be better, to be connected to yourself. And after you do that, you can truly finding the ways for yourself. And especially in the city which I live in today, Tel Aviv, it's very hard for people because there's a lot of FOMO going around. There's so many things every night. You can go out drinking, you can go meet up with your friends. So you have to learn how to be alone. And you have to make sacrifices. And one of the things which is hard for me to make a sacrifice, but in order for me to do all these things, I've put my love life as kind of like on hold. Because this is a thing that takes higher priority in all aspects. And you kind of have to see where that is. But depending where you are on this journey, I recommend setting one goal, one thing at a time, very small. Try 2 minutes. Try implementing the habit. Learn how to implement good habits, and then you can start masterminding your goals and building the systems that work. So I want to thank everybody for listening and for who you are. You're special and amazing. And I have been Benjamin J. Friedman, your honored host of the first podcast of accountability. Ooh, I don't know if the name will stick, but thank you very much. And please let me know if you liked, what I should improve, what I should do differently. It's all super helpful on the beginning. And yeah, I look forward to hearing you on. If anyone needs help with getting to that place of self-acceptance and knowing who you are, please contact me, because I help personal. Now my main goal is to help individuals get to that point, and then I will focus more on businesses. That's something for the end of the quarter. Um, but remember, you are awesome, you are amazing, and you are so much harder on yourself, and you should never speak to yourself as if you would a friend. Only if you would a friend. Thank you.